Hey, welcome to Two Nerds, One Podcast. This is just a rambling podcast about dumb shit that we're interested in. My name is Jake,
Hey, and I'm Scott.
and let's get started.
Yeah, boy. So this episode, we decided to talk about a specific theme. We got a lot of feedback that we were kind of going on and on about many things, and people didn't understand the format,
Yeah,
which is
right.
totally understandable. So this time, we're going to try to focus mostly on the current events, and that is, of course, the JFK assassination. It's a very hot topic still. No, it's about the coronavirus.
Well, I think my thought is like to talk about the existentialism inherent in the pandemic. I guess it's interesting too because you're in Germany and I'm in the US that there would be a much different perspective. And I think too, like because I'm in a blue state rather than a red state that is pretending to ignore everything, I think maybe my perspective is different.
I would say if I lived in North Carolina, still where I come from, I would have a very different perspective than you because the state's about 50% red, 50% blue.
Yeah. Well, I think too, right? Is like what are they thinking? I don't know. I always feel like whenever I watch the news of like Florida, Arizona, Texas, I'm exasperated, right? It's because we here in Massachusetts had an issue, right, where it just spiraled out of control initially, and we did everything we could to stop it, and now our numbers are they're going up now, but they're lower than they were before, whereas other states mainly below the Mason-Dixon line, are sort of, I don't know, ignoring all scientific reason, I guess would the best way to put it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, do they cover that in Germany at all?
They cover the general numbers and the different country situations. I actually have a list in front of me of the current numbers, and so if you don't mind, I will just read through it. Uh,
Sure, please.
Yeah, so this is according to the WHO, the international site. So in the continent-wise, so the Americas have so all of North and South America. They have 8,385,000 cases. Europe
What's
has. Hmm?
I was gonna say what's the population density, right?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I know the U.S. is 325 million, and then let's say probably another 50 million on top of that for the other countries. Just a rough guess.
Yeah.
Uh, Then for Europe, there's 3,216,000 cases. For Southeast Asia, it's 1,732 cases, 732,000. For the Mediterranean, it's 1,469,000. And for Africa, it's 696,000. So last but not least, Western Pacific has 284,000 cases. So there's an elephant in the room, and I didn't really mention it from the very beginning, but we are both of U.S. citizenship. And if you look at the countries that have the most cases, can you guess the top three?
I could guess. It's U.S., Brazil, and it's not Russia anymore, is it? Who is it?
It's India.
India, sure.
So of course there's going to be a discrepancy with the numbers based on the population density and if they're
Yeah.
doing confirmed cases only or the ones they tested and found antibodies. But in general, the U.S. is so far ahead of every other country. The U.S. has 4 million cases.
Oh God.
Brazil has 2,343,000 cases. And India has 1,385,000 cases. So the big question is, why is the U.S. so high? What is your theory?
Man, I think it's sort of astounding that I think just as a reaction, I'll answer your question, but I think just as a reaction, the fact that India has less than the entire U.S. and I have it pulled up right now, but let me just look Indian population. I think that their population is, yeah, they have one. Sorry, they have 1.35 billion people and less cases, which people I'm sure could say, well, they're testing less, so they have less confirmed cases, right? So, yeah, maybe we're quote unquote testing more, but I think to answer your question, is I think I don't know. I've been thinking about this for a while. Is like the fact that we're so like bullheaded, or that we think that everything it's like privilege, right? It's the American privilege, I guess I'll say,
Hmm.
of like nothing bad has happened and we're fine, and it's not nothing happened to me. I mean, there's even cases of people where they say my grandmother is dead, but I think it's still a hoax, right? So it's hard for me to wrap my head around that.
Okay. That is definitely a hardcore perspective on that. To just completely
Right.
disregard, saying, okay, she was old, she's going to die anyway.
Yeah, and then maybe they might not say it's a complete hoax and it's fake, but that it won't affect them, or that I don't know. I'm always reminded of silly enough of a speech in the movie Twister where the guy the main character, yeah, you like that? But the main character says, he gets really frustrated because everyone is chasing and enjoying themselves, and he says, you've never seen it, skip a house and then your neighbor's house and then hit your house, and it's kind of true in that, like, you don't really experience the danger until it's knocking at your door. So I don't know, I think coupled that with the fact that for whatever reason Americans can't not be completely devoid of any sort of like complex thought, for lack of a better, I don't know, I'm continuously shocked at how like the medical community isn't. I don't know, if I was a nurse or a doctor, I'd be like out of my head. That's just,
I think I would
you're
go
telling
nuts
people to
too.
stay home, and and then Florida's like, how do we open our bars back up?
Yeah,
So
that's the first place we should start, is the bars and then the schools, and then just go from there.
and the schools thing is complicated. I mean, I get it, right? It's like, from a compassionate perspective, like, kids aren't going to get the food that they might need, or to get away from their abusive parents, or to learn and explore and do things that they might not be able to do,
And
or
socialize,
are
right?
right, socialize, right. So it's hard. But I mean, the problem with that though is that there is evidence and more papers being written about children who catch coronavirus could potential there is a potential for them to get multiple organ failure. So it's like,
Right.
how many dead kids is worth it, right? And I don't know. This is like the gun problem too, right? It's like, how many dead kids is worth it? I don't know. I think, from a political perspective, it's sort of like, well, everyone I feel like I'm exasperated and I don't know what to do. And so those powers that be just take advantage of that fact and will do whatever they want.
So, just as a disclaimer, you also have a child, and you also have the problem of, okay, who's gonna watch my kid during this and this hours? So it's not like you're completely devoid of empathy for parents that might not be able to have an income if they're watching their child, or not be able to pay
Sure.
childcare, right?
Yeah, I mean, so that's the other part too, right? It's like, no, a lot of people are laid off, or they're underemployed, or they're furloughed. So like, if, let's say, I worked in an office as an assistant and I got laid off and I have a kid, I can't get a job at a grocery store, because who's going to watch my kid? Like, there's no childcare,
Right, and there's
right?
also the different shifts depending.
You're right. I mean, I can't. It's before all this. It's hard for me to imagine how a single mother could get by at all in this. At least in the areas I live, I just don't understand. And then even now, that there's less support and there's less. I don't know. There's no support for the kid or the mother. Right? It's like they are stuck.
Totally.
Not. They're stuck in neutral. I don't know. I think, I don't know. I'm pretty empathetic to know that there's that many people that are like completely unmoored from their life is just really sad.
I feel like to a certain extent, empathy is missing.
Mm. Yeah, that's the whole thing too, right? It's like the anti-mask movement. Oh God, I hate that. But yeah, the people that are not I don't know, the people that are against wearing a mask for any number of reasons. And I think, to their point is, well, the mask doesn't help me, right? It doesn't really stop any coronavirus from. It only stops a small percentage of any of it affecting you. But the idea is it blocks it from you going out, right? From if you have coronavirus in you, it stops it from going out of you and infecting someone else.
Right.
So I think having that, like, I don't know, just giving a shit for someone else besides you is hard for this country for a number of reasons. I think it's obviously been, I don't know if indoctrinated, that's probably not the right way to say it. It's, we have been taught that we're the only people that matter. We're the best.
We're special.
Right. And so there's no empathy for other people. And I think and
where does the sense of entitlement come from, saying I don't need to wear a mask, it doesn't apply to me?
Right. It's not, I think, how do I want to formulate this? It's not just a sense of entitlement, right? It's a life led in entitlement, right? Their whole lives are entitled, right? They never, it's not about how can someone help me? It's always about, why do you need help? Right.
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone helping me, which, whatever. It's just like, I don't know. It's all horseshit.
I totally agree.
It's exhausting. I don't know. I guess, why do you think there's, what did you say, 100 million cases?
In the US, there are currently 4 million cases.
4 million cases. Sure. I don't know. Do you have an excuse for these people?
I think it's not taking it seriously enough, especially the US is in a very unique geographical location. It's always had a kind of a history of isolationism, especially during the Harding administration of World War One. They just wanted to keep out of it. Throw back to World War One Mondays. So I'm trying to think of an answer. And then seeing the headlines and saying, oh, it's somewhere else. And politicization of the topic did not help. So I remember reading when the virus first came out and we first got word of it from China, then it was referred to even as the Wuhan flu or the China virus and not by the scientific name, right?
Sure.
So you're already giving a sense of ownership to something and saying it's their fault. So you kind of, in my opinion, and this could be complete BS, but my opinion, there's a psychological association of saying, well, they created it, it's their problem, they have to deal with it. And then we read all these crazy articles about this complete city shutting down, something that had never happened in my lifetime that I can remember. And then it got kind of surreal and crazy, and you're thinking, okay, that's way over there. But in Europe, we felt the same, I would say. And then suddenly, but then Italy is having cases, and then Spain is having cases, and other places are having cases. Oh shit, now Germany has cases too. And I'm pretty sure it was the same in the US. Suddenly, people were just unprepared, and it completely exploded the numbers.
I've noticed that too, is like an othering, right? Is like, everyone wants to point fingers and never take responsibility. I mean, it might go hand in hand of like the empathy and responsibility. There's a group of people that want to point the finger and say, well, it's their problem, it's their fault.
They should fix it, right?
Sure, right? Is like that doesn't drive you to a solution, right? It's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example of like
maybe an environmental catastrophe. For example.
Yeah. Or like let's make it even more simple. Someone hits your car, and then you say, "Well, it was them." I was like, "Okay, well, what are you going to do to fix it?" Well, it was them.
Yeah, that's not helping the situation.
Well, what are you going to do about it? Okay, it was them. Great. Like, let's say, for the sake of the argument, yes, it was China, and there's a black ops operation to bring the COVID to the U.S. I don't give a shit. Make up your own story. But what are you doing now, right? I don't give a shit how it was made or what the problem is. How are you fixing it? And are you just going to sit there, well, it's someone else's problem. I don't know. It's not me. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
I think it's also fascinating how different countries have taken different measures and with various degrees of success. Like in Europe, for example, Sweden decided, okay, we're just going to do nothing and see how that goes. And Of course, they had a number of cases that were higher, but the strategy, I could be wrong. I'm going to have to check the table here for Sweden. Yeah, the number of cases, of course, the population is lower, something like 4 or 5 million, I think, but they have only 78,900 confirmed cases right now at the time of recording. You would expect it to be much higher if you did nothing whatsoever and didn't have a mask ordinance and you didn't close all the stuff. They decided to just go with it, and somehow that worked out for them in some ways. Of course, people probably died that didn't need to or got infected, but it's an interesting approach.
I think that's, yeah, it's interesting, but I think part of that is that they already have a society of distance, right? Or like they're I don't know. I feel like
they touch each other with sticks,
right? Like,
as is the Swedish tradition.
I think they're northern. Like, I'm making very broad generalizations, but I think the Nordic countries are less touchy, we'll say, than even the U.S. Right? Like, I think there's a lot of touching. I think I become ultra aware of how much people touch or things they touch or I don't know, we just can't keep our hands off shit for whatever reason in the U.S. And I think that is a societal thing of like we can't not hug for whatever reason, right? Or
right.
It'd be interesting to see how it plays out once like flu season actually arrives. And
right.
And that's the other part that I'm dreading, right? Is like now that our cases in the U.S. are going up, it's July, late July here, nearly August, and it's hot.
How hot is it?
Here it's nearly 100 today.
Holy fuck, that is very, very warm.
I don't know what that is in C, but
let me translate for our European listeners, all one of them. So yeah, that's 38 almost in Celsius.
Yeah, which sounds really hot. The flu season is cyclical. I mean, part of this too is I think part of my fears too is like where does this end? I think the news and the media keep saying, oh, once we have a vaccine, the vaccines are very close. Come on, we're going to have a vaccine. I think it's more cheerleading and less reality.
Yeah, keeping people's hopes alive in that way.
Yeah, because I'm not...
Right, because once it's, let's say hypothetically we find one today, July 27th, 2020. So first, you can't just snap your fingers and everyone's got the vaccine.
Right.
Unfortunately, right? You have to do clinical trials, then you have to start up production, you have to distribute, you have to somehow get people to take the virus, because some people are also anti-vaxxers, let's not forget. And
sure.
Then, so it's not from one day to another. So I can totally respect your caution about reading those kinds of articles or headlines from the news about the virus.
Yeah, I mean, part of that too is like the fastest we've gone from no vaccine to vaccine over something like this is 4 years.
Is it really that long?
Yeah. So, and then the other part of this too, right, is it's a coronavirus, and it's it's like the common cold. It's like a flu. They change seasonally. They change often. There's not really a quote unquote cure. There's no current way to combat coronavirus with a vaccine.
Because you're saying because of the different strains and different mutations it could do.
Sure, and it doesn't really work that way, right? And part of this too is like your antibodies don't really last long enough for it to be like chickenpox. Everyone wants it to be chickenpox, right? This isn't chickenpox. You don't just get it once and then you're done, right? You can be reinfected. You can reinfect someone. I mean, and that's the other thing too, right? It's like the number of infections are the first round, right? And someone being reinfected, and the thought and worry is that those that are reinfected are actually worse off, and there isn't any data to support it. There's only doctors that I have listened to talk about it, in another podcast this week in virology, but they are concerned that the coronavirus is going to act like the dengue fever, where you not dengue fever. I can't remember the name. Anyway, long story short, point being is that they're worried upon reinfection, it sows the seeds the first time you're infected, and then the second time you're infected is basically when you die.
So it gets reactivated, and
ill.
then
Right, it's like a sleeper cell in your body, right?
yeah, and I think coupled with the long incubation time, so up to 14 days of you not showing any signs whatsoever, and then suddenly, bam, you've got it. And so you have to retrace your steps of the last 2 weeks of, okay, which store did I go to, which bar did I go to that happened to reopen too early, that kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah, I mean it's built to spread.
Yeah, if we were playing Plague Inc. right now, this would be a really good candidate for high score.
Yeah. I think, a lot of people there is a group, God, I don't know why I say people all the time. There is a group of people that, pretend that it's, fake or that, whatever, that want a bigger answer. But when large and scary things happen for seemingly no reason, sometimes there just isn't a reason.
Right, it's not easily explained where it came from and how it's come all this way.
Or why, right? Everyone wants a why, right? It's not, there's no why to this. It just is. And it goes back to our conversation before, is like, okay, it just is. So what are you doing now?
Right?
Like pointing a finger and saying, well, it's them, or saying, well, I don't understand it. That's not really like a solution to your problem.
I'll tell you something that you shouldn't do. So I was just going to say, I found it interesting that some people were even taking this not seriously, to the point where they get together and have parties. I think it was in Alabama, and then the first person, I think college-age kids, the first person to get sick wins a prize. That is just if you're a doctor, you must be reading headlines like that and thinking, there is no hope for this race.
There's concern too, right? To your point, is that there's no hope. There's concern over the medical community of people staying, of people leaving the profession because they can't handle it anymore. So there's, I think some hospitals and hospital groups are doing like I don't know if it's in hospital or what, but they're like doing like pushes for like, you can do it, and like humanity, essentially like humanity is worth saving.
Yep. That's so messed up, but I must say that the doctors and nurses are very courageous to deal with this, something that at first they didn't know what it was even, and then they had to work with it, and yeah, that must be difficult to battle that every day,
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm sure they fall into a couple of camps, right? It's like one being like they signed up for this. This is what they trained for. This is why they became doctors. This is why they are ICU nurses. This is, etc. So I think for them, I think it's that can be really discouraging when people are actively trying to get this thing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen it too, right? It's like doctors go on TV and then say, they have this expression on their face like, please, for the love of God, take my word for what I'm saying. They look exasperated. They look beside themselves on how to get through to people that they need to do something.
Yeah, I've seen some shit faces.
Yeah. And I guess my question to you too is like, is that how it functions in Germany? Is there mostly like US news coverage, or at least from a US perspective, there's like, if there's an international news story, it's a headline and then we move on.
To answer your question, in general, people in Germany are very respectful of any sort of advice given by medical experts. So the lockdown started let me rephrase, there's not a lockdown anymore, but in the end of March is when it all started. And so then restaurants and bars closed, and stores also, they were open, but you had to have the minimum distance between you and another person, the social distancing, and they only let a certain number of people in. Like say if it's a certain size, 50 people or 25 people, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing that I saw there is that people didn't protest the wearing of a mask. They decided to just go with it. And even though in some places it was kind of a state rule, the states could decide. Most states said, yeah, you have to wear a mask. But there were, I think there was one where people didn't have to, but people still wore them anyway. So it was taking the advice of the local and regional governments and also listening to the experts. That's how they dealt with it. And I think if you look at the cases, then it worked out pretty good for Germany. So let me just Google that while we're talking. Yeah, so Germany has a population of around 80 million, 85 million, and they have 205,269 confirmed cases. So it's not very many. Of course, it's too many. Like, I don't know, one case is still too many, but it's doing okay in that regard.
Yeah, and it's all perspective too, right? It's like how bad is it, and I'll give you an example of where I'm going with this. I had a conversation with my mother, and she had suggested she lives in Illinois, coming to Massachusetts for the holidays. And my reaction was, "Are you insane, lady?" But I think her world is, she lives in the far western suburbs, right? So like, there's not that many cases. She doesn't really know that many people. No one she knows has it, or no one she knows in their circle has had it, and etc. With that in mind, so she's removed that way. The other part of this is, when states like Arizona, Texas, Florida, etc. have put their fingers on the scale to say, like, this is bad. Like, at least we're not Texas and Florida, right? Like, that's bad.
Right.
There's an instinct to say, okay, well, at least we're not that bad, without evaluating how bad is actually bad.
So to
underestimate. Do you know what I mean by that? Right. to say, well, we're not as bad as X, or it could be worse, but it's still a liability, right? Is like there's no clear like advice from that I have seen, at least like through the media, of like, this is the number that your state should be at for you to like go to another state, or to travel, or to go to a bar, God forbid. I don't know. Like, if I lived in Texas or Florida or Arizona, I would be a shut-in. I mean, it's scary.
Yeah, it's really scary. It would also help to have that value, to say this is the normal. I think what you're talking about, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but the variable where the infection rate is not going to double, right? It would stay continuous. Do you know the variable I'm talking about?
Like logarithmic?
I think so. It's a variable regarding the rate of infections where the newer infections are less than the current existing cases. So
oh, sure. Oh.
I don't know the name of it off.
You mean like R0?
Yeah.
Or R0?
I think so, yeah. So it would be nice to have an R0 for your city, your state, your country, and then being able to see, okay, this is numerically how bad it is, right?
Yeah, because I think the numbers are hard to understand. There's 1,000 new cases in my state. I don't know what that means, right? Like, is that bad? Is that something that I should be concerned about? The
baseline comparison is missing, you're saying?
Right. So like, and not just compared to, it's like, how am I supposed to react to that? The number is helpful, right? Of like, okay, we had 1,000 infections, but I think it would also be helpful to provide the RO number, where I think I'm sure I'm wrong, but I think the RO number is the number of tests, or it's the number of infected, confirmed people from the tests over all of the tests. So like, if the number, essentially you want the number to be as close to one or lower. And I think someone has suggested that 10 is like an uncontrollable outbreak, and that I think Arizona had at one time being 34. So wow. That percentage is that the scale, like a scale, or a heat map or something like that might be more helpful in that then you can sort of say, well, okay, we're doing, because I think the problem is the numbers are confusing, right? Because people are stupid, and that includes me. So that
Me too.
so that when you say, well, the number's going up, and then you can just say, well, we're testing more, and while that is, you can say, yes, that's true, but the nuance. So then, as soon as you say "but," the nuance is lost, right? No one gives a shit about nuance. So you are left with the "but." So what you have to do is explain, like, what I think would be more impactful would be to provide a number that includes like a percentage or a ratio that includes the number of new confirmed versus the number of tests. Because then in that way you can say, well, we're testing a lot, so that's that's the reason why the numbers have gone up. So you can actually compare the two and say, okay, well, their numbers are up, but we also are doing 100,000 more tests a day, or our numbers are down, but our tests are down. So I think it's talking it through, like the nuance is going to be lost.
There's a lot of
right?
complexities to it.
Sure, right? And that's part of the problem of all this, is that it's complicated, right? Like no one really has a solution.
Yeah, and then there's also the factor that you can make a cool heat map or this kind of number, but you also need to promote it and have everyone accept that this is the standard value that should be used, including the press and people, the everyday Joes, and then the politicians, and that is quite a mammoth task. It's a very hard thing to do.
Sure, and that's part of the reason, that's part of the reason why the media is just showing number of new cases. Here's the big headline. Moving on.
Right.
It's too hard to explain, like, well, this is the number of new cases, and this is how many tests we've done, and this is what that means, and why it means that. There's always an explanation that needs to come along with it, instead of like, well, this is what's happening. All right, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, have a nice day. Well, I think we're coming to the closing few minutes of our podcast. I just wanted to ask, where do you see this going in the next few months? Do you have any predictions?
The next few months? I think it's going to get worse. Much.
So second wave.
I think the second wave is going to be worse than the first by a lot.
Unfortunately, I think I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, right, is like part of this too is that a lot of it depends too on what states do around schools.
Very true. Yeah. Yeah, I think Germany is considering reopening the schools. I
think part of this is that the first wave isn't even over yet too.
Right.
Right. So we're stuck in the first wave, and then the quote unquote second wave is coming, and we haven't even finished the first. At least here in the US. I would say on a state by state basis, some states have gone over their first wave, but overall as a country we have not gotten over our first wave.
I'm hoping.
Which is terrifying.
Of course.
I can't imagine what it would be like to be a teacher in Louisiana or Alabama or, North Carolina, right? It's like there is a speeding train coming towards you. There's nothing you could do about it. I think what will happen is that teachers' unions will start striking.
I think in North Carolina you're not allowed to unionize for that.
That
solves that problem right away.
Got him there, I guess. Jesus. I don't know. I think I would be surprised if the teachers' unions don't start, at the very least, putting their foot down about reopening. Or
I hope they step up to the plate and protest. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. See what happens.
So where are we?
It's not going to be good either way.
Agreed, 100%. I was just going to ask, so where are we in 1 year then? What's your prediction?
I think, man, this is going to make me sound like a doomsayer, but I think Trump is going to win this next election, and I don't think anything's going to change. I think it's going to get worse. We didn't even touch on the protests and all that, but those are going to get worse, I think. At least with the coronavirus, nothing is going to change in the U.S. in the next year. Nothing.
So you're seeing that the cases will continue to rise exponentially, or do you think they'll flatten out at some point?
From the studies I've seen, herd immunity is more or less impossible. So, yeah, this is going to keep going, baby. We're going to ride until enough people have died, and that'll be it. I don't know when then. I don't know. It's the same thing with gun control, right? It's like how many people have to die, right? It's like a school full of children got slaughtered, and nothing happened after that.
Which one?
I was thinking specifically of Newtown, but yeah, that's a good point. Which one?
Well, we hope that you, listener, that you stay healthy and don't get caught up in any school shootings or getting the coronavirus. So please wear a mask. And
Yeah, stay vigilant as far as avoiding people who are not empathetic to humankind.
agreed. And as always, we're very sorry you had to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, we're sorry. Thanks.